The radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody. Welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this, what is it, Wednesday night here in Madrid. I know it's kind of a weird hour for many of you. It's, what is it now? Probably around, 2 o'clock in the East Coast and 11 a.m. on the West Coast. So again, a program more oriented towards my European audiences. But hopefully some of you are sneaking a listen to the live show while, that picture looks a little weird, while at work. Let me just see something. I have a feeling, yeah, it's on the wrong camera. That's better. That's a much better picture. We'll get that in a minute. There we go. Let's see if that translates over here. It should translate in a minute into a better picture. There we go. Much better. All right. Hi, everybody. I hope you're all having a great week. As you know, I've been traveling around Europe. I am now in Madrid. I gave my last European tour talk last night here in Madrid at Universitat Francisco Marroquin, which is a Guatemalan university that has a satellite, I guess, or branch in Madrid, and I gave a talk there with Nikos was also there, so that was fun. But starting today until Monday, I'm on vacation. So this is vacation time, and but I'm still going to do the Yaron Book shows. We'll try to do as many as we can during this week, depending on kind of other things going on and my time, given that I'm on vacation with my wife. So that's that's kind of the plan for the next week or so. I am feeling better. Thank you, Gail, for asking. I'm feeling much better. So I recovered from whatever I had, I guess a mild cold. I'm fine. So feeling much better. Just in time for getting together with my wife. It worked out perfectly. Much more important for me to feel, really healthy when I'm on vacation with my wife than while I'm jumping from plane to plane to plane to plane, giving talks all over Europe. Less important. So, yes, so I'm in Spain. We've got we've got a magnificent hotel, really beautiful hotel. And we got a suite in the hotel. And I've actually got an office. This is an office. So it's really cool. I mean, the suites here are kind of little apartments, tiny little apartments. I've got a really nice office here. I have a desk, a chair. You can see my little window back there. It's actually a really great place to do the show, except for the fact, and I don't know if you can hear this or not, but the room is super echoey, right? So this is an old building, and it's all bricks or concrete or something, and it's domed. There's a round ceiling, and the room is super echoey. So I can hear myself with a lag as the sound bounces off into my ears. Hopefully it's not bouncing off into the microphone. Stephanie says you can hear an echo. It is what it is. This is the room we got. I don't know how to, with the equipment I have, I don't know how to, I don't have here a board or any kind of way to mitigate the echo, but it's, it is what it is. So hopefully you can tolerate it. I can hear the kind of, it's the sound quality is, but that's good. I'll try not to yell, because if I yell, if I get too excited, too passionate, I think the reverb will be just too offensive. So again, thank you all for joining me. I know it's a weird hour. It's not the the ideal time frame for you guys listening, but so be it. Of course, those of you who are not listening live, it doesn't matter to you. but I do have a good size audience of live people listening, and that's great given the weird time. And of course, I do appreciate. I think Roland has already started with the super chat. Roland says, and I'll just say this: greetings from the Canary Islands. Changed planes in Madrid yesterday. Could almost have run into you in the airport. Yeah, I was in the Madrid airport yesterday, so we almost met, Roland. Canary Islands, that's also interesting because there's a new, I was just talking to the guy at UFM, Universidad Francisco Marroquín here in Madrid, and the Canary Islands, there's just a new university has been started. It's a virtual university, online university, but it has as its program a kind of a classical liberal program. It's run by the guy who used to be the president of Francisco Marroquín in Guatemala. It's out of the Canary Islands, so interesting things happening in the Canary Islands. Who knows? Maybe I'll be coming to give talks in the Canary Islands. Who knows? We'll see. So, Roland, I don't know if you're there on vacation or there for work or there for living, but it could be a hub. It could be a place for interesting things to be happening. All right, let's see. We have a bunch of people on. I'm hoping we get a bunch of our Europeans on as well. Again, I understand that the timing is unusual. Plus, I didn't give you much notice, so I apologize. So we've only got about 50 people listening live, but I'm sure a lot of you will listen after the fact. All right, so let's start with a. I can hear myself in the other room, so I have a feeling my wife's listening to the show in the other room. So let's start with this question of natural gas, which is it is fascinating and interesting. So all the last 6 months, I think we've been hearing stories about the coming shortage of natural gas. We've been hearing stories about Europeans freezing to death. We've been hearing stories about really, real significant problems with the European economy because of a shortage and the restraints on natural gas. Guys who are joining the show, I know there's an echo. I'm in a room with an echo. I'm not sure exactly how to solve the problem with the equipment I have. So I guess you're just gonna, either turn this off or tolerate it, but there's nothing much I can do. I am very cognizant of the echo, and I can hear it as I speak. So imagine how disorienting that is. I know you guys can hear it after the fact. Anyway, so we've been hearing over and over again and I'm trying to speak softer because I think the softer I speak, the less the echo will be. I think the more I raise my voice, the more reverb we get, but maybe I'm wrong. We'll see. So we've been told that there's a massive natural gas crisis. We've been told that this is going to be a disaster. That there's no way to solve it. There's been panic. People have been upset. People have been. I mean, it's typical of the media to blow this out of proportion. People are going to die. Europe is freezing. Energy crisis in Europe. We're totally dependent on Russia. We can't survive without Russia. If we don't sign a peace agreement tomorrow with Russia, and oil and gas supplies will come. Armageddon is going to happen, and this is consistent with the general kind of general appetite for catastrophe that exists in the world in which we live. We're always seeing catastrophe. It's just around the corner. Armageddon is going to happen. Maybe not this year, but certainly next year. Maybe not because of this thing, but because of that thing. We are an interesting species that seems to believe that the end of the world in one way or another is always just around the corner. It's always going to happen. It's always in my lifetime going to happen. So the whole natural gas problem in Europe has been blown out of proportion. And then, of course, there was the gas pipeline explosion. And the conclusion from that was, well, now even if, now the Europeans are finished because they can't get the natural gas from Europe, and this is a massive, horrific disaster, and we should immediately beg Putin to be nice to us and to open up the spigots and provide us with natural gas, because who knows what will happen if we don't have enough heating right now. So that's the story. The reality is, of course, very different. Because once it became evident that there was going to be a natural gas problem, what do markets do when supply, when a supply of a good we believe are going to shrink into the future, yet demand is as high as ever? What happens to prices? Well, prices adjust. Prices start going up. Not because right now there's a shortage of natural gas, not because right now there's a shortage, but because we have futures markets, because we can buy on contract natural gas or oil or pretty much any commodity today, we can buy it today, but for future delivery, then people bid up the price of natural gas today because they're worried about the ability to purchase it in the future. So what actually happened to prices of natural gas as this panic came about is the natural gas prices went up. What happens when natural gas prices go up? Well, demand for it goes down. So people consume less of it. Energy prices went up. People consume less energy. When energy prices go up, consumption of natural gas went down. What European countries did with the fact that consumption went down because prices went up is they started to refill their storage. There is massive storage underground in the ground. There are these massive capacity to store natural gas in Europe. And what has been happening is because demand went down, because prices went up, European governments have been massively using opportunity, the additional supply of natural gas, funneling it into storage. So one, storage is at record highs. It's, there's some capacity for the storage in Europe that can be filled with natural gas. I think with something like 94% of that. That's way above expectations. That's way above anybody predicted, way above what Europe thought would be enough to survive the winter. That was around 80%, and we're now at 94%. So that's one thing that happened. Beautiful how markets work. It's beautiful how prices work. There's going to be a shortage. We raise prices. People start demanding less. That creates the potential for surplus. And that surplus gets driven into warehousing, right? Into inventory, into some kind of place where we can store this stuff. So that has happened. The second thing that happens when prices go up. When prices go up, people become very, very creative in terms of finding new sources of gas. Prices went up because the expectation was that gas from Russia would be diminished dramatically because of the war in Ukraine, and indeed the supply of gas from Russia declined significantly. So we're now getting, Western Europe is now getting about 25% of the natural gas that it gets in a typical year. So typically it's getting 75% less. So what's happening? So where's the rest of the natural gas coming from? Again, because prices went up, demand went down. That covers part of it. But as soon as it was clear that the supplies from Russia were going to be constrained because of the war in Ukraine, as soon as it was clear that Putin was playing games with the natural gas, and it became clear that Europe is incentivized not to buy natural gas from Russia because it doesn't want to support the Russian war machine. Remember, Germany was, I'm not sure what the number is today, but at the beginning of the war was sending $1 billion a day in cash, in dollars, to Russia in exchange for the natural gas and the oil it was receiving. As soon as it became clear that they didn't want to continue doing that, Germany and other countries immediately start looking for alternative sources of natural gas. And it turns out there are other players in the marketplace who have natural gas. The challenge is, how do we get it to Europe. So for example, the United States has plenty of natural gas because of fracking. We have, in a sense, more natural gas than we consume in the United States. And as a consequence, we can export natural gas. Qatar, because of it is in the Persian Gulf, it can access natural gas from the entire Arabian Peninsula. It has massive quantities of natural gas. Kazakhstan has natural gas. Israel has natural gas. Egypt has natural gas. Norway has natural gas. So the first thing is increase the purchase of natural gas from these alternative sources. Now the problem is, as you might know, how do you get the natural gas to Europe? Now some places have pipelines. Kazakhstan actually has a pipeline that goes through Turkey, that comes through the Balkans, and actually can access places like Bulgaria and Eastern Europe and supply natural gas to those places through a pipeline that can replace the natural gas that they lose from Russia. But how do you get natural gas from the Gulf, from the Persian Gulf? How do you get natural gas from the United States? Well, it's called liquefied natural gas. I mean, it's a pretty amazing technology and pretty stunning, after all. If you think about, I mean, we take these things for granted, we always do. But what happens is that you have these terminals at a port, and what they do is they turn the gas into a liquid. They turn the gas into a liquid. I assume through high pressure or through massive cooling, but they turn the natural gas into a liquid. They then pipe the liquid onto a ship, a special LNG ship that has the equipment to hold and maintain the natural gas in liquid form. I think it's under pressure, right? In liquid form. Then the ship travels to an LNG port, let's say in Europe, let's say it gets loaded up in Houston, and then is shipped to Europe, where they unload the liquid, turn it back into natural gas, and use the pipeline to pipe it to wherever it's needed. So what has happened is that Europe has become much more reliant on LNG terminals. And at the beginning of the crisis, the idea was there are not enough of them, but it turns out that they might be enough. I think more are being built. Spain, where I am right now, I think has about 5 LNG terminals, maybe 6 LNG terminals, and it has pipes where they can pipe it into Europe, into parts of Western Europe. Portugal, where I was yesterday, has a number of LNG terminals, and again, they can pipe it into the rest of Europe. American ships have been just back and forth between America and Europe with LNG ships. Now, it's interesting, just as an aside, you can take a ship from Houston, Texas, or from Baltimore using an LNG terminal and ship natural gas to Europe, but you cannot take the same ship and ship that natural gas to Puerto Rico or even to Boston because of the Jones Act. The Jones Act actually prohibits using LNG ships which are not US flagged and not US owned and not US built. There's only one such LNG ships that qualifies by all those standards to actually ship natural gas to other ports in the United States. So we can ship gas to Europe, we can't ship gas within the United States using LNG. So stupid. Stupid is like too mild of a term. So evil, so anti-progress, so anti-flourishing, so debilitating for the United States, particularly for places like Puerto Rico, but even for Boston, which in some years was importing gas from Russia because they could get a ship from Russia to come to Boston, but not from Baltimore, even though Baltimore would be dramatically cheaper because there are no ships that can travel from Baltimore to Boston according to US law. It's moronic. Thank you, Spiral Days. Moronic is exactly the right, it's evilly moronic. There needs to be a word that combines evil with moronic, with stupid, right? A word that combines the two. Anyway, Europe has accelerated the amount of LNG supplies that it is getting. And indeed, right now, last I read, there are 34 LNG ships outside European ports waiting to unload the natural gas that they have. And there's so much natural gas flowing into Europe right now that there was a day, I think earlier this week, where prices went negative. That is, I'll pay you not to give me natural gas. I'll pay you to take the natural gas off my hands because I don't have anywhere to store it. I don't have anywhere to put it. Natural gas prices in Europe have plummeted. They are way, way, way down. Energy prices should follow, unless, of course, they're being manipulated by governments to keep them high to suppress demand, which is quite possible. But I was shocked when I read this article, but then once the shock went away, I said, I'm not surprised at all. I know, you know, that markets work. And when you get a shock like the Russian shock, yes, prices will go through the roof. But what happens when prices go through the roof? In a global market like the market for natural gas? Supply increases. People take the opportunity when prices are high to produce a lot of it and to ship a lot of it so they can get lots of money. They can make a huge profit. Now prices are low right now, so that's going to go away for a while. The incentive not to ship that natural gas is very low, but the stockpiles are all full. All the backup channels for Europe are full. If prices start going up again as the weather becomes colder and demand increases, those LNG boats can get back in the water because prices will be higher. Again, there are 34 such ships waiting to unload in ports in Europe. They will all be going back to Qatar, the USA, or wherever they came from. Finland has increased amount of natural gas they are pumping to Europe. Again, other countries like Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, I think, have increased the supply. I suspect that all the fear-mongering, all the complaining, all the talk, all the Armageddon, all that, I think Europe's going to be fine this winter in terms of natural gas. I think we're heading towards a recession. It has nothing to do with this, but so we're not going to be fine economically. But from the perspective of people freezing, that's probably not going to happen. Everybody's probably overreacted, probably too much fear. One other thing has happened, and I don't know what you want to attribute this to. You could, if you really wanted to, attribute this to climate change, or really to not so much to climate change, but to global warming. But the fact is that the fall so far, to my immense benefit, has been very mild. It's been a warm fall. At least this is what I read. And as a consequence, what happens when the fall is warm? People use less natural gas. And again, another driver for demand to be low, for those increased supplies to be pumped into reservoirs, pumped into storage. And again, we're gonna be fine. You know, all the stories, the constant stories about Armageddon, and everything to justify appeasement, everything to justify compromise, anything to justify getting along with Putin. We want to fear. The latest, of course, and this will be my transition into, I guess, the discussion about kind of the war update. The latest, of course, is the idea that nuclear war, they're going to bomb, that Russia's going to start a nuclear war, we're going to die from radiation, Europe is toast, we should, Jordan Peterson is very good at this. We need to appease the Russians, we need to compromise them, we need to give Putin what he wants, because Putin won't lose, and Putin not losing might mean nuclear war, or it might mean all kinds of dark things that are not always mentioned exactly, but just fear. The idea of fear. We need to fear the Russians. We need to fear, the winter. We need to fear climate change. And fear is an unbelievable motivation, it turns out. And people are hugely motivated by fear, and they write checks because of fear. They get excited because of fear. They suddenly vote over fear. And the consequence of all of that is that, bad policy is enacted, because it's enacted not out of thought, not out of reason, not out of actually assessing the dangers and the probabilities and the risks involved, but out of just pure fear. So we see, Jordan Peterson, we see Elon Musk, and even Biden himself talking about, we're on the brink of Armageddon. The more you talk about it, the more you normalize it, the more you make it possible, and the more you make possible, you make real, compromise and appeasement. This week, two things happened politically with regard to the Russian war in the United States that relate to appeasement. One, a bunch of progressive Democrats wrote a letter to Biden. It was kind of a weird letter, badly phrased, just weirdly written, which encouraged the administration to engage in negotiations with Putin to achieve some kind of settlement, ceasefire, some kind of negotiated to stop the war, because it's a bad war, and bad things can happen, and we should be really afraid of the Russians. They didn't say that, but that's the implication. And hey, we're spending a lot of money on it, and should the United States really be funding a war and supporting a war? Aren't we all anti-war after all? And a bunch of progressives signed this contract. They, I think today, retracted it all because they got slammed by, the center-left media. The center-left media just went after them and slammed them. And I think politically, it looked like it was a losing strategy. They got slammed by Democratic constituencies. And they walked it back. And they took back, a lot of the congressmen said, well, undoing it. Of course, they did write the letter. But at the same time, Congressman McCarthy, who is going to be the Speaker of the House come November, come 2 weeks from now, because I think next week the Republicans will take the House and they will control the House. And McCarthy, I think it's McCarthy, right? Congressman McCarthy. I think he will become the Speaker of the House. He basically said Republicans are not going to approve aid to Ukraine for the war. So this is we should not be supporting Ukraine is the implication, and I mean, what he's really playing to is, we have these massive deficits in the United States. Why are we spending money on a war? Why are we taking a risk? Again, Putin might do X, Y, Z. We should be afraid of Putin. Why are we funding this war? Why are we sending equipment over there? Why is America taking a position? Why does America care about this? And it was, and of course, by implication is this kind of moral equivalency between Putin and Ukraine, between Russia and Ukraine, and we, the United States, should be in the middle of it. Now, let me talk a little bit about this idea of the United States funding the war in funding the Ukrainian supplies of weapons, and why I think it's justified, or why I think the critics of it are way off base. So the United States says it's going to spend, $50 to $60 billion in humanitarian and military aid to Ukraine. Much of that is in the form of loans that might be repaid years from now, maybe decades from now. Who knows when they'll be repaid? But the idea is this is not a grant, this is a loan. So part of it is a loan. But think of it this way: the United States spends. And this is going to be over several years. This is not going to be all at once. While you keep hearing these numbers thrown around, it's not like we just sent them $60 billion. This is going to be a long-term plan. It's very difficult to spend $60 billion in 1 year. This is going to be money that's going to be doled out. All that Congress has done is approved the ability of the United States government to provide them with this aid and loans for weapons and ultimately economic aid for rebuilding once the war is over. But the war is not going to be over for a long, long time, in my view. So let's think a little bit about this aid. First, I find it really, really interesting. And by the way, the complaining about the foreign aid comes from really three sources, I would say. One is the far left. The far left hates the fact that we're providing aid to Ukraine. The far left is sympathetic to Putin. It was sympathetic to the Soviet Union. Why wouldn't it be sympathetic now to Putin? It hates America. The far left hates America. The far left hates Europe. It basically is super sympathetic to authoritarianism, and therefore it's pro-Putin. And you'd expect that from the far left. You've noticed that OAC, Ocasio-Cortez, is not exactly being vocal in support of Ukraine in this war. She's basically kept quiet because her constituency, the progressives, the far left, are not pro-Ukraine. They're much more likely to be pro-Russia. It is, the center left and the center right that are pro-Ukraine, but the far left is clearly pro-Russia and has been AOC, sorry, not OAC, AOC, has been pro-Russia. So that's one group. The second group is what you'd call the new right. And the new right now, I think, is becoming more and more the dominant voice, at least within the Republican Party. So while some Republican senators have voted for aid to Ukraine, many have not, or some have not, and there's growing voices in the campaign trail where I think J.D. Vance and Masters, and I'm not sure about Oz, but some of the others have basically said that they would not support aid for Ukraine. And there's a group on the right, on the Republican side, that basically holds somewhat similar views to the far left, that are sympathetic to Putin. Putin, after all, is anti-left. Putin, after all, is pro-Christianity, or at least says he is. Putin, after all, this is the Jordan Peterson line, kind of. Putin, after all, is one of us on the right. He is one of the good guys. We shouldn't alienate him. We shouldn't threaten him. We shouldn't piss him off. So Putin was, so the conservatives, some of the conservatives, I'd say the national conservatives and the paleo conservatives and the theocratic conservatives, basically the Trumpists are basically pro-Russia or kind of neutral and certainly against giving any aid to Ukraine. Then the third group are the libertarians. Again, not all libertarians, but certainly some libertarians, they call them the paleo libertarians. And they are very similar to the far left, the far right, the far left, the far libertarian, they're all the same thing. And they basically object to spending the money. But here's the thing about the money. And I sympathize with the money because, you should really, really think through where government should spend money and on what government should spend money. And it's easy to yell national defense, but you need to actually be able to justify national defense. And that's hard. So I want to get to trying to justify aid for Ukraine in a minute. But before I get to that, just notice that the only foreign aid that libertarians and conservatives ever complain about is foreign aid to Israel and foreign aid to our allies. There's about 50, I think the last number in the budget was $58 billion of foreign aid, not including the Ukrainian money. $58 billion a year that is spent on foreign aid. Much of that foreign aid goes to places like Ethiopia, Africa, different places in Africa. Ethiopia, of course, is in Africa, but other places in Africa, places in all over the place. $58 billion. Now, part of that goes to Israel and Egypt. They each get about $3 billion of foreign aid. And of course, now a bunch of money is going to Ukraine. But notice that the complaining is always about Israel and Ukraine. The complaining is always about aid that goes to countries that are actually American allies, that actually in their actions, and you could argue in the use of the money, further American interests, certainly from the perspective of fighting our enemies and furthering the cause of Western civilization, whereas aid, the rest of the money is going to all kinds of dictators and all kinds of governments that are doing the opposite of furthering American interest, and yet we give them aid. But notice that the worst thing, according to the libertarians and according to many of these conservatives, and of course the far left, all three groups, the worst kind of aid is aid that one could conceive of as self-interested, that one could conceive of as helping bring our ideas, but also just help our allies reject the real forces of darkness in the world, whether those forces are Islamist in the case of Israel, or whether the forces are Russian in the case of providing Ukraine. The people we hate the most to give money to are the people who are closest to our values. The people we hate the most to give money to who are people who are fighting to some extent or another enemies that we share. Russia is an enemy of the United States, in my view, and once it launched a war against Ukraine, became such an enemy. It doesn't mean we should literally send troops to fight them, but it does mean that we should boycott them, and we should, to the extent that we can, support the people who are indeed fighting them. But aid to Ethiopia, yeah, I'm sure the libertarians would say, yes, we're against all foreign aid. But what do they get passionate about? Not about the altruistic aid, not about the aid that is motivated by pure altruism, where the U.S. has nothing to gain from. The aid that really pisses them off, the aid that really gets them excited, that really gets them motivated, that really gets them passionate, is the aid to actual countries that actually are helpful to the causes of the United States, actually helpful in fighting the evil out there. So I think that's interesting. Now, what would be the justification? What would have been the justification for helping out Ukraine? Well, first, again, of all the foreign aid we give, this kind of makes the most sense. But if we believe that Russia's aggression is a sign of a regime that is violent, that has interests in using violence and using war to establish control, not just over its own territory and over its own people, which would be bad enough, but over others. Now, primarily in Europe, but given that Russia is a nuclear power, that is a threat to the United States. They have ballistic missiles that can reach the United States. Europe, of course, whether I agree with this or not, we are a member of NATO. We, through NATO, have a treaty to defend Europe. Russia has just declared itself an enemy of NATO by invading Ukraine. I think we have every interest to make it clear to Putin that aggression will not be acceptable, that aggression is, basically something that we will not tolerate, that, we might not go to war over Ukraine, but beware, because we would if it's NATO, because we have a treaty. And while we're not going to go to war over Ukraine, we're going to support Ukraine in every way we can because of the threat that he poses to a potential war with the United States through NATO. We do not want that war. We do not want a direct war with Russia because of the potential to escalate. So let's end it in Ukraine. Let's allow Ukraine to defeat Russia and make it clear to Russia that war is not an option. It's not a possibility. There's no way for them to win. There's no way for them to actually advance their interests through war. If we can prove that to them on the battlefields of Ukraine, then it's quite possible and quite likely that we will never have to engage them on the battlefields of a NATO country with American troops, and now the threat of an actual nuclear war between the United States and Russia. Because if Putin decided to invade Romania or Latvia or Lithuania or Estonia or Poland or Finland now, Finland and Sweden are going to join NATO, or Norway, it would be war with the United States because we are a member of NATO. Shouldn't we do whatever we can to avoid that? Isn't helping Ukraine a way to avoid it? If Putin had been allowed to just take Ukraine, if he had been emboldened by that, if Biden had said, yeah, I'm not intervening, let him have it, which I think is what ultimately Trump would have done, would that have not emboldened Putin to go maybe after Moldova, who's not a NATO country, but now puts him on the border with Romania? Would that not have emboldened him to little bit, inch forward and maybe take a little bit and see, would we actually defend Estonia, which Putin could probably take in a day, given how small of a country it is? What would we do? How would we react? I mean, if he had taken Ukraine, he would have been emboldened to try, and then we would have had no choice. Now, you could argue the United States should not be a member of NATO, and I'm very sympathetic to that argument, and that this is all a European problem, and I'm very sympathetic to that argument. But at the end of the day, we are a member of NATO. That makes it our problem, and we have no choice but to respond. And not responding is a sign of weakness. Not responding would embolden evil all over the world, would embolden Putin, and we would be in graver and graver and graver danger. So let's support the Ukrainians so the Ukrainians win this, so that it doesn't turn into something more. The Ukrainians are doing, and this is the update, the Ukrainians are doing a phenomenal job on the battlefield. The Russians keep reinforcing their troops, keep trying to bring new recruits, keep trying to dig into new positions to defend them, and the Ukrainians are still holding up. They're chipping away. On the east, there are a number of areas in which Russia has tried to launch offensives, tried to increase, particularly in the Donbass area, try to increase their ability to take land and increase they want to take the whole Donbass province. They have an oblast. They have not been able to do that. And the Ukrainians have not allowed it. They have not, the Russians have gained nothing for months now on the east, in spite of all the resources they plowed into it. In the meantime, Russian lines of supply are being attacked directly in the east. In the Luhansk province, where, since the taking of Liman, the Ukrainians have not made a lot of progress, but they're chipping away. And my expectation is that they will significantly, they will over the next few weeks, I think, before winter really sets in, and Ukraine has benefited from the mild winter Europe has had. They will probably take much of Luhansk province by the beginning of the winter. In the south, you've got Gershon, where there is ongoing fighting. About a few weeks ago, the Ukrainians made huge amount of progress, taking the kind of northeast part of that province and chipping away at the south, in the southeast and the southwest. They have now kind of progress has slowed significantly because the Russians have reinforced their positions. However, it appears that Russia is slowly evacuating its troops out of the city of Kherson, and ultimately that city will fall to the Ukrainians, and they will have the whole northern section of that province. Whether they'll be able to cross the river and attack the Russians on the southern side of the river before winter sets in is probably yet to be determined. But there are other things the Ukrainians could do. They can attack further east. They can encircle the Russians. They can, so progress can be made even in the winter by the Ukrainians, but progress will slow as everything slows in winter. But the Ukrainians are doing phenomenally well on the battlefield. The Russians are losing. Part of the way you can see that the Russians are losing on the battlefield is they are resorting now to, instead of winning on the battlefield, what they're trying to do is weaken the resolve of the Ukrainian people. They're doing that by attacking civilian targets. Primarily, they're trying to shut down the energy supply. So they're trying to shut down electricity, trying to shut down natural gas plants, trying to shut down the capacity of Ukrainians to warm themselves in the winter. They want to weaken the resolve of the Ukrainians to fight. I think this will backfire. I think Ukrainians were poor not that long ago. I mean, they're still poor, but they were really poor not that long ago under the Soviet Union. Ukrainians have seen their homes attacked, shattered, destroyed by a foreign power. I think the Ukrainians can handle the cold. I think if anything, the cold, the suffering will motivate them even more to hate the Russians, to resent what Russia is doing to them, to fight back, and to, in a sense, penalize the Russians for what they have done. So I think this will backfire, but you can see the kind of desperation. You can also see the desperation in the fact that most of these attacks, or many of these attacks, are not anymore using Russian cruise missiles, which was what they were using in the first few months of the war, but the supplies of those cruise missiles have been depleted, and the Russian industrial complex is not capable of producing these missiles and other munitions at the pace at which they are being used on the battlefield. So what Russia has become dependent on now is their ability to buy drones from Iran, of all countries. And there are Iranian operatives now in Crimea teaching the Russians how to operate these drones. Many of these drones are kamikaze drones. Kamikaze drones are basically drones that are missiles themselves. They crash into the target and explodes. The drone dies. The drone is finished, but you need a constant supply of these. But the Iranians have a lot of drones. They can produce more drones. Interestingly enough, I think the Israelis are watching this very carefully. They are, would be my expectation is that they are refining and improving their anti-drone technology, their technology against what they see now happening in Ukraine, because they can imagine that happening if the Iranians ever attack Israel directly. So this will be an interesting learning opportunity for the Israeli military in terms of how to deal with a massive drone attack, which Israel can expect one day from Iran. Let's see. And then finally, so they're buying drones from Iran. That's a pretty desperate act. And then they're also buying, from what we can tell, munitions and, weaponry from North Korea. There's another high-tech, innovative country that is supplying the Russians with the best, state-of-the-art weapons for which they can use in Ukraine. In the meantime, the United States, Germany, and the rest of Europe, UK in particular, supplying the Ukrainians with true innovative, state-of-the-art, cutting-edge technology. And a German general? A German general just read an article by a German general saying, yes, what the war in Ukraine is showing us that Western weapon systems are superior. It's only taking you 6 months into the war to figure this out. I've been saying this from day one, and I've been saying that this would be the cause for why the West would win, Ukraine has a chance of winning this, or at least really fighting back against the superior numbers of Russia, because of the massive, not small, massive technological advantage the Western weapon systems have. And we're seeing that day in, day out on the battlefield in Ukraine. So another, plus to freedom. Freedom builds better weapon systems than authoritarians. I know my pacifist libertarian non-friends are freaking out when I say that, because, oh my God, isn't that horrible? No, weapons are good. I'm all for weapons because you sometimes need them to defend yourself against brutes like thugs, evil thugs like Putin. Freedom is strong, as Jennifer says. Freedom is absolutely strong. Freedom breeds strength. All right, what else do we know about? Yeah, Putin is supposedly has just created a new committee of the Politburo that's in charge of finding creative and new and innovative ways to improve the production of weapon systems for the war, because even Putin recognizes he's way behind. So there's a committee now, and that's a huge step, right? There's a committee. I think the committee will meet regularly. They will produce a report. That report will have a plan. That plan will be put in place. And I'm confident, because the 5-year plans have always worked out so well, that plan will be implemented to the T, and it will produce a great victory for the Russian forces in Ukraine. So they're falling apart when they start committees to improve the production of weapons to supply the front. That they can't win when they rely on committees to dictate the path of the war. All right, so that's my Russia war update. I find it, one more last point. I find it mind-boggling, astounding, and upsetting, and I've said this before and I keep saying it because I'm still upset by it. The number of libertarians that I meet on the road now that are pro-Russia, the number of libertarians that I meet on the road and everywhere that hate Israel, the number of libertarians that I meet wherever I go that hate America and hate the West so much that they are pro-Russia, pro-Islamist, pro-anybody who will actually fight against the West. And that's what motivates them, that's what drives them. And I've always known they exist. I've seen them in American libertarianism, but going on the road and meeting some of them, and somebody mentioned the fact that I encountered such a libertarian at a talk that I gave in Japan. That talk is up online. It's about individual rights in the context of foreign policy, individual rights in the context of global, interstate relationships. So I encourage you to watch that talk. I think it's really, really good. I think you'll enjoy it. So you can go and you can find it on my channel under Your Own Lectures. It's on the playlist Your Own Lectures. But it's a talk I gave at the University of Tokyo. I've uploaded now online. It's available to you. Go watch it. I think you'll enjoy it. I think it's really good. But the Q&A is particularly illustrative because this libertarian comes out and says, he comes out with this pro-Putin nonsense, and I set him in his place. I don't remember exactly what he said and exactly what I said, but you should go and watch the video and you'll get the gist of it. You'll get the way in which I demolish the guy, I think. All right. So yes, I meet them all over the place. It's stunning to me. It's upsetting. But it is what it is. These are our so-called libertarian friends. This is why I don't consider me, part of the libertarian movement. I don't want to be in the same tent with these guys. I think that kind of attitude towards foreign policy is beneath contempt. That kind of attitude towards foreign policy distances, they can stay over there. I don't want them in my tent. I'm going to have my own, even if my tent is going to be really, really small. Even if my tent is tiny, because I won't associate with people who I think ultimately are going to stab me in the back and murder me. I only want a small tent. I've said this often, right? I'm only going to, fight up that hill, march up that hill with my bayonet. I'm only doing that with people I like, with people who share my values, and with people I trust. I'm not doing it with anybody else. So my tent is small, so be it. It's going to be principled, and it's going to be passionate, and we're going to fight like hell. And you guys, the other plus side of this trip is, again, I keep meeting people who are listeners to my show. I keep meeting people who this show has had a huge impact on their life. That is so rewarding. That is so amazing. We are building a movement here that is a global movement. It's centered maybe to some extent around the show, but it's ultimately an Ayn Rand movement. It's centered around Ayn Rand's ideas. It's centered around objectivism. My show is just a lead in. My show is a presentation of, an application of, but ultimately, this is about Ayn Rand and objectivism. But I'm meeting so many people all over the world in all kinds of places. I mean, I met a lot of them in Portugal. That was amazing. In Lisbon, a bunch of people who were there, but who were at the talk because of my talk and because of the show, and talk so much about how the show had changed them. Not that many in Spain, so we've got to work on Spain. But Portugal, for whatever reason, I think it's because of English. The young Portuguese speak English in a way that young Spaniards do not. Partially because Portugal is a small country. I think that's the main thing. It's so small that they don't dub their television. This is one of the Portuguese guys told me this, right? In Spain, English shows are shown on television, but they're dubbed into Spanish. So the kids watching English shows don't get an opportunity to hear English and to read the subtitles and slowly learn the English. In Portugal, because it's a small country, it's not worth dubbing. So they never actually get to hear the English. And as a consequence, they actually get to hear the English, and they actually learn the English. And young Portuguese speak great English, one of the best countries in Europe in terms of English. So it's a great place for us. It's a great place for the show. It's a great place for Ayn Rand. They can read Ayn Rand's books in Portuguese, and they can also read them in English. Most of them have read them in English. And many of them who came to the event read Ayn Rand because of this show. So we're doing what we set out to do. I'm excited about that. The trip to Europe, if anything, has reinvigorated me and given me more motivation to keep doing this. Not that I was wavering about that, but just more. More is good. All right, let's see. The one thing that's not motivating me right now is the super chat, which is beyond pathetic. So I don't know. The goal is $650, but basically we've done nothing towards that, and we're already an hour in. So I don't know what's going on. Maybe we don't have any live listeners potentially with money. So that's possible. Ooh, Mugat says evil plus moronic equals demonic. I like that. Demonic. Yes, it's got the moronic because it's got the monic, and it's got evil implied in it. All right, demonic. I'll have to start trying to use that. That'd be good. Anyway, please consider supporting the show through the super chat. It's a great way to support the show, to motivate me, to increase our reach, to encourage me to do more shows. We're way behind on the super chat right now. Of the 650, we've only raised about 50. So a lot of work needs to go in there. So hopefully some of you will come through. Let's see, what else did I want to say? Yes, likes. We could do a lot better on the likes right now. We've got like 61 likes. We've got 91 people watching live, but they've been as many as 100 people watching live. So let's get the likes up. Maybe before you leave, just make sure to like the show. Really helps with the algorithms. It gets, again, this is the way to expose more people out there to the show and get people more engaged, get people more involved. So that'll be great. Like the show, use the super chat. If by the way, if you're not listening live, the best way to support the show is youronbookshow.com/support, where you can use PayPal, or you can go to Patreon. A lot of you recently have been using Patreon, so Patreon funds are growing. That's great. Let's grow them even further. And then of course there's also Subscribestar and Locals, where you can also use those platforms to support the show. Patreon seems to be where the momentum is right now, but I also like the PayPal platform. So any one of those platforms are great. Please use them, and please support the show more. All right, we've got just a few super chat questions, because super chat really is dead today. I don't know what's going on. It's probably the time of day. Just I guess the people who usually write big super chat questions are not here, but so weird. All right. Let's see. So we got the super chat. Let me start with John, who's asked the $20 questions. That's actually the first $20 question. This might be a show that it's taken the most time before a $20 question has been asked. It's a challenge, guys. All right, we'll have to figure out what to do about all this because we can't have a massive drop-off on Super Chat funds. We actually need to increase. We need to fund this show. We need to keep it alive. All right, John asked, when traveling to a new country, what kind of activities do you recommend to get most value out of the experience? Wow, I mean, it really depends on the kind of country that you're going to. And it also depends on what you like. So I'd say you want to find a way. So if you arrive, I'd say in a new city rather than a new country, and let's say you're going to spend a few days there, or a few weeks there, a few days there. The first thing you want to do as a new country is really get an overview of the place. You want to get a feel for it. And so you want to have a map. And I know we have Google Maps, Apple Maps, all of those maps. The problem with those maps is that usually they're focused in on a small area. And I like to get a sense of a city. Where's north, where's south, where's the center, what are the high, how do you get to places, where the tourist attractions, what's going on. And for that, I actually like a paper map because it gives me the outlay. And then I use the electronic map to go places, to go from place to place. I like the size of a paper map. I like that you can start drawing on it. You can do that on a laptop, on a computer, but it's hard to do on the phone, just too small. So get a lay of the land. And then a really good thing is to do one of these city tours, whether it's a bus tour, or a private tour if you want to pay a private guide, but get on something that just gives you the highlights, the key overlooks where you can see the view. If you're in a place like Rio de Janeiro, that's a big part of what you're going to do in Rio is go to different views, because that's what the city is known for, is the views. It's the geography. It's nature. It's what nature has. Less about museums or cultural issues. If you're going to Paris, a lot of what it is about, okay, where's the Louvre? You want to go, where's the d'Orsay Museum? Where's this other museum? Where's the Seine, this famous river that's supposed to be the most romantic place on the planet Earth? You want to get a sense of where all these places are, and a tour for that is great. And then pick the cultural places you want to go. What museums are must-haves? Like in Paris, you got to go to the Louvre. You got to go to d'Orsay. If you love sculpture, you got to go to the Rodin Museum. And there's a bunch of others, right, that you've got to make. So what are the places you cannot miss? You cannot miss. And you can use tour guidebooks. You can use the internet. There are lots of ways in order to do that. If they're plays, like in London, when you go to London, you want to go see a play. You want to go see a musical. You want to experience what it is to go see theater in London. Make sure to book those in advance. But again, London is a great city to get a bus tour and just go around. Then I recommend really doing a lot of walking. Try to walk everywhere, because walking will give you a really sense of the place. You'll see the architecture, you'll see the streets, you'll see the difference between the neighborhoods. You'll bump into people, literally and figuratively. You'll bump into people. You'll find little restaurants, you'll find little coffee shops. Just walk a lot. I mean, I did, when I was in Paris 3 days ago, 18,000 steps, right? Because I walked all over. When I'm in London, I do 10,000 steps easily every day because I'm walking everywhere. We're walking to business meetings, walking to lectures, walking to meetings, walking everywhere. Walking just to see, just for sightseeing. The museum is over there. It's a half-hour walk. Great, because you really get a sense of a place when you walk it. Much less so when you're Ubering or when you're driving or taking a taxi or anything like that. You really don't get a flavor of it. Now, some places are harder to do that. You can't get from one side of Hong Kong to one side of the Hong Kong Bay to the other side of the Hong Kong easily. You have to take an Uber. But once you get to a site you want to walk, it gets really hot and humid in Hong Kong. So walking can be a challenge. Same you could say about Bangkok, or when it's hot and humid, it's very difficult. But wear comfortable clothes, wear sandals, wear shorts, wear t-shirts and walk, because you'll get an amazing sense. And walk it in during the day and then walk in the evening. Go see what the city, the vibe, the sense of the city during the night is. So do the museums, pick some restaurants and book in advance, book some plays, or like we're here in Madrid, we're going to see the opera on Saturday, we're going to see Aida. Go experience some cultural, opera. I love opera. I don't have opera really in Puerto Rico. I get an opportunity to go see Aida, one of my favorite operas of all time, in Madrid. There might not be English translation. I don't care. I know the music. It's going to be so much fun. It's going to be hopefully a beautiful production. I hope they don't modernize it and spoil it. But anyway, it's going to be fun just to take the night out and do something like that. So, you want to go. You want to find. I don't know if you're into food. You want to go find like the market, the mercado in Spain, and a lot of cities have it, where there are little stalls selling food and stuff like that. So depending on your interests, just look for the places, spend a day getting an overview, and then go to the particular places. Yeah, opera has to be sung in Italian when it's Italian. When it's German, it should be sung in German. But almost all opera is in either Italian or German. Some operas in French. There are probably some operas in Spanish, but I can't think of them, because even ones that are set in Spain are sung in a different language. But really, the languages of opera are primarily Italian, German, and then secondly, so French. And then so translation is important, but usually the stories in opera are stupid. And Aida is a pretty simple story, so you can tell what's being sung and you can tell what's happening without knowing the every word by word. Italian is beautiful, even if you can't understand what they're saying. My wife can translate, although you can't talk at an opera, you have to be quiet. So anyway, those are some of the things that you should do. All right, hopefully that was helpful, John. All right, Super Chat has picked up, definitely picked up. Thank you, guys. But we're still like 475 short, so still a long way to go to get to our kind of targets. All right, Adam, is just put $50 in. That helps a lot. Adam says, not sure if you're familiar with Spanish economist Daniel Lacalle. I'm not, but he's worth a read, listen. By the way, I echo your sentiments today. Thank you. Yes, he's referring to the echo from the room vibration. This is not a good room for doing a show, but on the other hand, it's an office. I'm not bothering my wife while I do this. There's not a lot of noise going on. She can do her thing, maybe even listening to the show. I can do my thing, and this is really, really comfortable. But the room does have reverberation that does cause an echo. So I apologize for that. But I'll look up the Economist. Thanks for pointing him out. Let me copy that. All right. Let's see. I think the next $50 question is Shazbot. And I know Shazbot, I owe you a bunch, and I owe some other people. Once I get back to Puerto Rico, top of my agenda is the review of the movies that people have asked me to review. So I've got 3 or 4 of them, I know, on my list. All right, Matthew asks, oh no, Shazbot, I was going to do Shazbot. Jesus, what am I doing? Shazbot says, do staff at ARI ever play practical jokes on each other? Yes. Less so when I was CEO. I don't know why. Maybe I don't have a sense of humor. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't my style. I don't know. But the practical joke that was the funniest, I think, that was played on me by the former CEO of the Ayn Rand Institute, Mike Berliner. I can tell you about that. And Mike is a practical joker, and I'm not. So maybe because I wasn't, people didn't do as much of it. I don't know now with Tal as the CEO. I don't get a sense of Tal as a practical joker, but Mike definitely was. So here's the practical joke he played on me, which was actually quite hysterical. David used to work at the Institute. David he says, I would replay messages on our whiteboards. So yeah, obviously there was some kidding around and joking at the Institute while I was CEO. I was just not a practical joker. I'm just not. But there was stuff going on. And yes, the whiteboard was often, public whiteboard often had funny stuff on it. But this is hysterical. This is one that Mike played on me. So the first time ever that I was interviewed like on a news show on television was by a local television station in LA. I can't even remember what the topic was, but they came to the office, they set up lighting and everything, and they did an interview with me, from which they clipped, I don't know, half a minute, right? 30 seconds, which is kind of what they do, what is done at these kind of interviews. So they came, they did the interview, and then it wasn't live. And then, so in the evening, we're watching television to watch my interview. And I come on, and I say what I say, and I'm looking okay, and what I say is not stupid. But right underneath me is somebody else's name. It's somebody else. I don't know who it is, but somebody else's name. It's not Yaron Brook Einstein Institute. And then the next night, the interview is this guy in the street. He's a black guy, big guy, kind of is talking a little slow. And right under, I can't remember what he said, wasn't super intelligent. Right under that, it says Yaron Brook Ayn Rand Institute. It's like, this is my first experience as CEO of the Ayn Rand Institute, 2001 maybe, before 9/11. My first experience with the media as the CEO of the Ayn Rand Institute. And this is my name going out there into the world, and it's on the wrong guy saying the wrong things. So I was horrified. Mike took a screenshot from his television. I don't know how he got it, how he managed. Maybe he was taping it and he replayed it and he took a camera photo of it. He printed it out. And the next day when we came to the office, the picture of this guy on the screen, this black guy on the screen with Yaron Brook, chairman of the CEO of the Ayn Rand Institute underneath it, was plastered all over the office at the Institute. And it was pretty funny. It was pretty funny. So I don't know if you think that's funny, but pretty funny and sickening at the same time. All right, let's see what other questions we have. Matthew, back to Matthew. Thank you, Shazbot, for the question. Let's see. Chat is quiet. What's happened to chat? There we go. All right, Matthew asked, did you see that the UK banned fracking again today? No. Really? Who are these people? Why are they so, what was it, demonic? Why are they so demonic? How is that conceivable? Yeah, again, the US will bail out the rest of the world by actually being the only place that allows for fracking and therefore has plenty of natural gas and will supply through LNG to the rest of the world. Stephanie says, not demonic, it's retardedly demonic. I think you're right, it's retardedly demonic. I mean, I thought the Truss government actually said they would lift the ban on fracking. And as I said, the fall of the Truss government, the complete and utter, unequivocal, disastrous failure of the Truss government is going to be a catastrophe for the UK. Because it's basically all the good things that she stood for are now going to be dismissed as part of that losing agenda. So the new government in the UK, which was put into place yesterday, which is basically run by a centrist, stand for nothing, middle of the road, compromising, Keynesian, nothingness, Rishi Sunak is his name. It's a disaster. It's just a disaster. We're going back. I mean, Rishi Sunak was Treasury Secretary in a sense of the Johnson administration. He was boring, uninteresting. It was middle of the road, Keynesian. And this is what we got instead of Liz Truss, which had some radical ideas, but who had no idea how to implement them, no idea how to sell them, and no idea what order to put them into place. When are they going to make me PM of the UK? I mean, when do I get that job? I want the job. I want a job where I get to actually do stuff like that. Because I could get it right. I'd surround myself with really, really good people. And we would get it right. And we would change the world. At least for a short period of time until everybody riled up against us and undid it all. But I don't know, UK PM, or I don't know, could you make me president of the United States or president of some little place somewhere that we could actually try this all out and we could test out the theories and put them into place? God, there must be some country out there that's looking for a radical president or prime minister. I don't know. Very frustrating. Because, I mean, I've said this before on the show, but the most frustrating thing about my life, yeah, Canada would be a good example. Although I don't know that even if they gave me the job, I would do it in Canada because it's so friggin' cold. Jennifer would take the job in Canada. Governor of Puerto Rico, maybe, but I'd be constrained by the U.S. federal government. Maybe Georgia, maybe Tbilisi, they would go for it. I don't know. Israel? You think Israel? God, they would never have me. They would surrender to the Palestinians before they would appoint me prime minister. Jennifer is ready to take the job. You hear Canadians? Jennifer is ready. She doesn't mind the cold. She's ready to go to Ottawa. She's ready to take the job, the premiership of Liberland. Liberland would never take me. You should have seen the almost violent argument I got into with the, quote, president, or was it dictator or whatever, of Liberland years ago when Liberland was first started. The guy hates my guts. There's no way ever that I would get a leadership position in Liberland. All right, enough fantasizing about something that's never going to happen. Where are we? Super chat. Not going well today. Just kind of stuck there. Like when I travel, all the whales, the people who can write big checks, are not following us when I'm traveling. It's interesting. So anyway, we'll see what happens. We'll see if we can get them back once I get back into routine in Puerto Rico, which actually won't happen until December. December is the next time we'll get into routine in Puerto Rico. Until then, in and out. I don't need to befriend Jeff Bezos. I just need like the regulars who write $100, $200, $500 like super chats for there to be more of those and for them to be more engaged in to be more listening live to the shows in these weird hours. Anyway, all right. Ertan, I think that's Ertan. Are you sympathetic to the U.S. support for the YPG-PYD, which is Syrian branch of the PKK, communist or terrorist organization organized by the U.S. U.S. support for them just because they fight against ISIS is an immoral policy, I think. Yeah, I mean, but yes, whether the YPG, YDP is in the PKK or all terrorist organizations, I don't know enough about it to comment. The fact that Ogaran thinks they are is not enough reason for me to believe that. But I think the issue is a bigger issue, and that is that the fight against ISIS is an American fight. The war against ISIS, the war against Islamists all over the world is an American fight. They basically declared us as the enemy. So this is something that America should be doing, not with proxies, but itself. The US should be out there destroying ISIS. So I think the fact that we're using and supporting the YPG, or supporting anybody, to help fight ISIS is pathetic and a sign of weakness. The United States could have and should have, has the capacity to crush ISIS, destroy them, and completely demolish them without taking particular sides in the Syria civil war or taking particular sides among the Kurds. I don't know about the YPG, but generally Kurds in Iraq certainly have a case to have their own country. The Kurds in Iraq certainly have a case to receive American support in the fight against ISIS. Whether the ones in Syria and the ones in Turkey do or not, I don't know. But certainly the United States should have taken care of ISIS without anybody's support. Doesn't need anybody's support. Just crush them. What the hell? This is a war that was declared in the United States by these organizations, and the responsibility of the U.S. government in its job as protecting U.S. citizens and U.S. property is to demolish them and to destroy them and to defeat them and to bring them to their knees. And that should have been the U.S. military doing that. It doesn't need the Kurds help. It doesn't need them to be the main force that is doing the work. Thanks, Ertan, for the support. Thanks for the question. Stefan asks, can you explain the situation in Yemen and why the U.S. is allied against the Houthis? Yeah, I mean, again, I'm not going to go into great detail in the exact history and everything like that, but fundamentally, the Houthis in Yemen represent the Shiites in Yemen. So the Houthis are a tribe in Yemen. Yemen, like most Arab societies, is a tribal society. Like most countries in the Arabian Peninsula, it is split between Sunnis and Shiites. The Houthis are Shiites, and they have basically been fighting a war with the Sunnis in Yemen for control over Yemen. Yemen sits at the southern side of the Arabian Peninsula, so it is southeast of southeast of Saudi Arabia, and there's a civil war waging over there and has been for a long time. But this is what makes this civil war of interest to Saudi Arabia, and what makes this war, I think, by extension, of interest to the United States. And that is that the Houthis are being funded, armed, supported, encouraged. The civil war wouldn't be possible without Iran. I believe Iran is an enemy of the United States. I believe Iran declared war on the United States in 1979 and has never given up on that. Iran will do everything in its power, anywhere, everywhere in the world that it can, to undermine American interests, to kill Americans, to undermine anything that they do. They certainly undermined us in Iraq. Whether you think the Iraq war was justified or not, it was none of Iran's business. Yet they engaged in killing Americans. They killed Americans in Lebanon. Again, whether Americans should have been there or not, none of Iran's business. They killed Americans. They should suffer the consequence of that. They're undermining our interest in Syria. They are clearly an enemy of our ally Israel. They're developing nuclear weapons that could be a threat to the Americans. They've declared enemies of America forever. The chant "Death to America" is part of Friday prayer. It's why I'm always excited about any form of revolution in Iran. And again, I bring back that the girl revolution, the women's revolution in Iran is ongoing, and the fact that it's not getting support, media, any kind of attention from anybody, and the fact that the libertarians are so opposed to it says everything you need to know about the state of the world and the state of the libertarian movement, that they are opposed to this. But anyway, America has every interest to fight American interests wherever they can. America obviously has shown that it will not go to war directly with Iran, but America has a strong interest, a strong incentive not to allow Iran to establish itself as a power in the Middle East. Right now, Iranian-controlled political parties are forming a government in Iraq. They will control Iraq. They control Syria, and they control Lebanon. They basically have the entire Fertile Crescent, that arc that goes from Lebanon through Syria into Iraq. They have control over that. There are troops all over the place. They're placing missiles. They're placing troops in the place, and they dominate that part of the Middle East. That is the whole entire northern and eastern border to Saudi Arabia. The eastern border is, of course, the Persian Gulf, but on the other side of the Persian Gulf is Iran. To the north is Iraq and ultimately Syria. And then the other idea is that they would control the south through Yemen. There are Shiites in Saudi Arabia that the Iranians are funding, and Iranians are supporting terrorist attacks against the Saudi government. I'm not a supporter of the Saudi government, but I would rather the Saudi government control the oil supply out of Saudi Arabia than the Iranian government control it. It's enough that Iran now controls, in a sense, the oil out of Iraq, and that we did nothing to allow them to basically take control of Iraq. So we have a strong incentive for Iran not to gain power, not to gain control over more and more resources, not to increase its power, influence, and prowess in the Middle East. And in that sense, we have an incentive not to allow the Houthis to win in Yemen and take control of another country. Again, Iran has been very good at taking control over Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon, primarily because those countries have a complete and utter vacuum. A complete and utter vacuum of any kind of alternative leadership, and they filled that vacuum. Yemen, the same thing. Civil war, Iran comes in, supports one side, fills the vacuum. Now it's in their control. The next one is to try a civil war in Saudi Arabia. That would not be good for the West and for the U.S. and for Israel. All right, Alex. He says, about the Ukraine subject, 1, it is important to know that Ukraine pays a hefty price in dead and wounded. Yes, it does. Tens of thousands of Ukrainians are dying on the battlefield and among civilians. 2, the U.S. military aid is hesitant and slow, way below expectations in quality and quantity. I don't know whose expectations, but certainly way below expectations of the Ukrainians for what it could be. But you don't have to convince me. I would do whatever it took to defeat the Russians and to avoid Russian victory, because I think the worst thing for U.S. interests and for the future of Europe and the future of NATO is a Russian victory on the battlefields of Ukraine. So I would provide Ukrainians with whatever weapons necessary in order to defeat the Russians. But the problem is, and the real problem is that the right in the United States, and I warned you of this, the Trumpist right is pro-Russia, it's pro-Putin. It might not always admit to being pro-Russian and pro-Putin, but it's certainly anti-Ukraine. And the real danger, Alex and the rest of you, that we Americans face, the real danger that Ukraine faces, is that as Republicans take control now of the House and Senate, help whatever hesitant, half-assed help the Ukrainians are getting, they're going to get zero, they're going to get zilch. And that is a disaster for Ukraine, and I think for all of us. So it's super troubling. It's super problematic. that the right in the United States can become so corrupt. And that is what Trump did. That is what Trump did. He corrupted the right. And God, the left is beyond corruption. God, the left is beyond corruption. And now we have a corrupt right. What's left? That's why I was so anti-Trump for the whole time. So I you know, and if Trump wins in 2024 and we have a pro-Putin, a pro-aggressive Putin, president, God help us. That would be a great super chat question, Tazy. Adam, thank you for the support. I appreciate it. Let's see. Okay, we are, a little bit more super chat, and we'd make it a halfway of the goal, which is pretty good for a 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Now it's 3:30 in the afternoon show, East Coast time. Just putting it out there. All right, equal to reality asks, flyby support, have a tight deadline I need to meet, so I quickly dropped in to show my support. Thank you. We'll watch tomorrow when I have brought myself some more time to do so. Cheers and thank you. Thank you, equal to reality. All right, Cook asks, this is Tazy's question. What are your thoughts on Kanye West's recent antics? God, I'm going to alienate people, right? Because I know so many of you love Kanye West, right? He's this amazing, brilliant artist. So let me start by saying, I never got it. I still don't get it. I don't like rap. I don't like hip hop. I don't like Kanye. I don't like anything he's done. I'm not impressed. He strikes me as a complete kook. People say he's got, some kind of real mental illness. I guess he just did Lex Friedman, so I should watch that show. But everything I've seen of him, I'm unimpressed. Yes, he's a rap singer who's not a radical leftist. So what? He doesn't strike me as particularly intellectual or particularly bright or particularly interesting when it comes to his views about anything. He's a mishmash of stuff. He's been unbelievably successful. That success has gone to his head. What did they say? He's bipolar? It could be he's bipolar. I don't know. I feel a little sorry for him. I know Don Watkins is a big Kanye fan of his music and said that he understands he's bipolar and kind of feels sorry for him because he's bipolar and got mental problems. I have no connection to Kanye. So I read his tweets. I see the anti-Semitic horrible stuff he writes. I see other stuff he says and he writes, and it's just ridiculous. Cook says in the Lex interview, Kanye straight up said he's a tribalist and encourages fans to do what you feel, follow your instincts. That's who Kanye is. He's a intellectual nothing. And the fact that he, this is the problem. I said this in one of my events. Who cares what Kanye thinks? He's a, so he does good rap music. Does that mean he knows anything about anything? No. Celebrities are zeros. They're nothing when it comes to anything outside of the thing that they're celebrities for. So I never found it interesting what the political views was of movie stars or rock stars or sports. Like, I don't care what LeBron James thinks about politics. All I care about is how well he plays basketball. So I have no interest in their politics. And it's not that I'm even offended by it if they don't have the same politics as me. It's irrelevant. It's just a random person from my perspective because the fact that they're good at basketball doesn't make them good or anything else. at anything else, at ideas. So Kanye typifies a certain attitude that I think exists among rap singers and within that culture, which has elements of anti-Semitism in it, associated with money and bankers and greed and so on, associate Jews with that. I think, but I think Kanye is more than that. He's just not intellectual. He's just not rational. He's just not a person to be emulated. He's not interesting, right? He's a rap singer, fine. I like his rap, great. But I wouldn't listen to a Lex Friedman interview with Kanye West, other than to discover that he's bad. But Cook just gave me the quote I need, and now I'm completely uninterested in what Kanye has to say. So, people, I think, got all excited about Kanye because he came across for a while as not left. But not being left is not a virtue, not left. It's what are you, which determines whether you have virtues or not. And what is he? He's certainly not of any intellectual inclination that is pro-liberty, pro-freedom, pro-reason, pro-egoism. Oops, what did I do? Okay, Andrew says, and I agree with this, it's getting hard to admire Elon Musk. His response to Gary Kasparov's valid criticism of his peace plan was to call him a name for a feminine hygiene product. What does the disrespect in public discourse say about the culture? It's truly horrible. And that people are justifying Musk because he's a hero for them in business is just pathetic. And I feel bad about all the good things I said about Elon Musk. But yes, I mean, his attack on Kasparov is a good guy. He's a guy who's been fighting the authoritarians for over a decade now, for probably a couple of decades. He's a guy who has money in the game. He has something at stake. He has been out there in the streets demonstrating. He knows what Putin is, what Putin stands for, what Putin represents, is willing and has been willing throughout his career to stand up for liberty, to stand up for freedom, to fight for the right cause. And libertarians and some conservatives and Elon Musk make fun of him and stab him in the back. I think it's just pathetic what Elon Musk has done. And then, okay, so he doesn't quite understand the situation between Russia and Ukraine, so he might say something stupid about peace, or he's afraid of a nuclear war. But then he turns around and says equally as stupid stuff about China and about the need for compromise with China and the need to create to give China basically control over Taiwan. And what a loser, intellectually and ideologically. Again, it's so disappointing. It's so disappointing. He was so good for a while there, shaking the fixtures to the sky and providing Starlink to the Ukrainians and opening his factory up in spite of the controls during COVID and all of that. I mean, there's so much positive, but he's so erratic and so not thoughtful. I mean, he switched from being on the left to being on the right so quickly, and without, I think, principle and without real focus and without real ideology. It's unfortunate and sad and disappointing to watch. Thank you, Andrew. All right, let's see. We're halfway to 650, so that's good. We at least achieved half. So it's always good to see that. Well, about somebody putting in $100 would be nice to get us over 400, which used to be our old goal. But anyway, thanks for everybody who's got us to where we are today. All right, let's quickly run through these. Stefan says, you handled the Japanese libertarian heckler very well in your recent post. Thank you. Other than repetition and practice, any tips on how to deal with this? Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think, you shouldn't be afraid to show your anger. You shouldn't be afraid to show your passion. You shouldn't be afraid to show your frustration in appropriate times. And I was angry with them, and I think it showed. I was a little afraid that I was turning off the audience, but they loved it. They thought my anger was justified. You could tell from the audience. I snapped back at the guy. I put him in his place. I shut him up. And they responded positively because they thought what he said and what he was doing was inappropriate, and what he said was ridiculous. What was it? Not moronic. It was demonic. Yeah. And they wouldn't have, my worry about turning off the audience turned out to be not, and now you should watch it, and you tell me if you think I got too angry with him or not. But yeah, I encourage everybody to watch that video. I think I say stuff there about foreign policy that I probably haven't covered elsewhere, so it's a good talk in the sense that it has original material, and I think the interchange with the libertarian, maybe Action Jackson should turn that interchange with the Japanese libertarian. He wasn't Japanese, by the way, he was an American, I think, but he was in Japan. No, he wasn't an American, he was a Russian. He was a Russian living in Japan. Maybe we can turn that into a short video. That would be a good short video. I don't know if Action Jackson, you're listening, or you're there, or you'll hear this later, but that would be a good segment to cut out of that talk. Know your stuff and don't be afraid, without getting into long arguments, once you get the confidence and self-esteem to do it, to shut them down. All right, Adam, in taking your suggestion to travel more seriously, so we recently went and saw the Cleveland Orchestra play Mahler's Second. It was amazing. Any thoughts on Mahler? Have you seen the Cleveland Orchestra in person? So I have not seen the Cleveland Orchestra in person, but at least historically, it's one of my favorite orchestras particularly when it was conducted by George Zell, who was an amazing conductor, and I really loved it. But as you experienced, watching an orchestra play live, it's just a fantastic experience. The acoustics are fantastic. You can see the violinist play the violin. You just see it, and it's beautiful. And because everybody in the place is silent, you get that experience of just focusing on the music. People are not chatting. It's not background music. You totally focus on what's happening on stage, and it's a blast. So yes, do it. It's fabulous. I actually like Mahler, and I've grown to like him more over the years. I don't like everything, but I certainly like certain pieces, the second being one of my favorites, the parts of it that are stunning. Some of the second has some of the best music ever, I think, the most inspiring music ever written. He's not easy. I don't recommend him for beginners. I wouldn't start with Mahler. But Mahler, M-A-H-L-E-R. M-A-H-L-E-R. But he's fantastic when you get to... Now, he's mostly dark. He had a rough life, and he had a rough sense of life, but his children died, his wife died. I mean, it's a horror story if you ever read a biography of Mahler's. It's not pleasant. But he wrote some of the most beautiful, touching, emotionally stirring music. Much of it melancholy, but moving, deeply moving. And he wrote some amazingly heroic music. The second has some of that. Trumpets and heroism and the whole orchestra. He wrote a symphony, I think it's the 8th symphony, where the orchestra and the choir are 1,000 people. 1,000 people. I think that's right. It's just this massive thing. No, it can't be 1,000 people. Is it 100 people? No, I think it's 1,000 people. Anyway, somebody correct me. So it's just amazing. It's just the sheer force and power of it. And a lot of his music is like that. Now, Mahler's easiest piece to listen to is his First Symphony, which is beautiful and magnificent, probably his most benevolent piece. I think his first and second, his second might be his best symphony. His third, I enjoy, but I haven't quite really gotten it. I love his fourth. Love his fourth. I don't know why exactly. There's something particularly benevolent about the opening movement of the first. It's a little fragmented, but it's got a very, very, I think, happy, benevolent kind of feel to it. So my favorites are the first, the second, and the fourth. But then, like, what is it? I think there's the slow movement of the fifth is stunning. Stunning. So beautiful, so touching. Sad, but so moving. I mean, when music can make you feel, even if the feeling is a feeling of sadness, it can make you feel deeply. That is power. That ability of music to stir you, to move you. God, I mean, it's so magnificent. And music can do that like nothing else. And so Mahler's music can really get you that way. And suddenly, I find his latest symphonies hard. All the movements, they don't completely integrate for me. Some of the movements are harder than others. But some of the pieces there, some of the movements, magnificent. And you know, the eighth it's called Symphony of 1,000 and has 1,000 people on stage. Takes quite logistical effort, but the power of that, the volume, and as I told you before, the classical music needs to be loud, and the Symphony of 1,000 gets loud. Yes, I love it. So I'm a fan. I'm a fan, even though it's hard, and even though a lot of it's malevolent or sad, but it's so. It's the power of the music to move you is so important and so wonderful with Mahler. So anyway, but yes, first, second, fourth, my favorites. Third, next, and then I like the rest of them as well. Yeah. Spark says, thanks for posting your recent talks. Terrific. Appreciate it. More to come, because I did quite a few talks. Some more talks in the pipeline. I'll be posting them in the weeks to come. Oh God, lots of super chat questions. We're already almost 2 hours in. I'm getting hungry. All right. Cook says, a lot of conservatives who claim to be opposed to socialism have also argued that money sent to Ukraine should be instead spent to help the poor in America. Yeah, I mean, go figure. At the end of the day, they are altruists and statists. It's just, God. I mean, we do one thing saying we can't afford it. There's a huge deficit. We should shrink the deficit. Here's all, first argue to get rid of the $50 billion in foreign aid. And I'd vote for that, including foreign aid to Israel. Israel doesn't need it. So, but they don't argue to cut spending. I mean, very few have argued to cut all foreign aid, which I would do. Adam says, a quote and a donation to meet the old 400 goal. Thank you, Adam. Really, really appreciate that. Wow, we're almost at 450 now. So that's great. That's our old goal. The quote is, the man who damns money has obtained it dishonestly. The man who respects it has earned it. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Adam. Inspiring both in the support and inspiring in the quotation. I appreciate it. What happened here? Okay, let's see. What do you? Let me just do this one just because it's on the topic. Adam says Cleveland is playing Mahler's first in February. You should go. have the mushroom ravioli at Valerio's, which I guess is close to the concert hall in Cleveland. You won't be disappointed. Yeah, I mean, Cleveland has always had one of the best orchestras in the world. Again, when it had Göksel as its conductor, it was one of the best orchestras in the world. He was one of the greatest conductors ever. I'm sure it's a great symphony today. If you have an opportunity to go to Cleveland and watch Mahler's First, go do it. Yeah, I mean, travel and experience. Gain experiences. Life is made up of experiences, even less so than stuff. I think life is made of experiences. Thank you, Adam. Oops, let me just get this. All right, let's see. Colin, don't get to listen to live often. Thanks for everything. Thank you, Colin. Valdrin, your best move was to expand outside the US. I've witnessed myself the rising prosperity of the second world where liberal capitalist ideas take root. My best move? Well, absolutely. I mean, I've been doing this for well over 10 years, expanding overseas. I think it's been incredibly valuable. It's more than 12 years, 15 years or so. And it's bearing fruit. And again, over 50% of the listeners to this show are not in the US, all over the place. And some of the most passionate are not in the US. Iron Mercat, give Euron a dragon and make him king of Westeros. Yeah, I want a dragon, although I have fear of heights. Don't tell me who sits on the Iron Throne at the end of this season, because I haven't watched the final 2 episodes. So don't say anything. Thanks, Ian. Jason, what are some of your favorite sports films? As charity, if you will, can you check out Hustle with Adam Sandler? Say a few words ranking it in a sports film. I enjoyed Hustle. I saw Hustle. It was a fun movie. I don't think it was a great movie. It was a fun movie. It was inspiring. It focused on kind of what sports movies typically focus on: hard work, diligence. You can achieve, if you work hard and if you are responsible and if you do the right things, you can win it. So it's certainly a movie, an enjoyable movie. And I like basketball, so it was a fun movie. God, I mean, the problem is you asked me out of the blue, so I have to bring to mind the names of movies, and that, my mind doesn't work that way. I need a list, and then of all sports movies, and then I can rank them. I mean, my favorite sports movies, and I think the sport, and some of you will not agree with me on this, I think the sport most conducive to movies, weirdly enough, is baseball. Because what a movie can do is make the 3-hour-long baseball game, it can emphasize the high drama that exists within the game, because it can emphasize kind of the tension and the drama between the pitcher and the batter, the conflict, and it can really elevate that in a way that I don't think you can do in most other sports, because most other sports movies, you just want to watch the game, and it's a fast game. Baseball is so slow, you typically don't want to watch the game, you want to watch the movie. So maybe my favorite, and again, I don't have a list in front of me, maybe my favorite sports movie is a movie called The Natural with Robert Redford. It's a baseball movie. It's a movie about redemption, but it's a movie that has a very good representation of evil and everything that evil represents and everything that evil is about, and the essence of evil being envy and the essence of evil being hatred of the good for being the good. So it's envy and evil. Evil is also represented by darkness and the good by light. Watch it again. Jennifer says she remembers that movie. Watch it again, and try to watch it properly on a bigger screen as you can with kind of with focus, and watch the theme. And watch how it evolves. And I don't remember it enough to articulate a theme right now and all of that, but it's definitely good versus evil, and it's represented beautifully on the baseball field, and it has no problem being romantic. It has no problem having the good guys win. It has no problem letting it all hang out in a sense, being emotional, letting you experience it all. It is one of my favorite, call it modern movies. It's called The Natural. It's with Robert Redford. Robert Redford plays a baseball player. And I think there are a lot of good baseball movies, but you're going to have to give me a list. Yes, I mean, Jason also says, thanks, love Natural. Actually, first sports film, I saw it 14 years. Great music too. Absolutely great music. You're absolutely right. The music is fabulous. The music is appropriately dramatic and appropriately emotional. I can't remember who wrote the music, but it's fabulous. It's a kind of movie that deserves a proper movie review. A fun movie. It's a little mystical, but kind of fun was the movie with Kevin Costner, where the famous line is, "If you build it, they will come." It has a certain romance to it. It has a certain style to it. It has a certain passion for values and a passion for building it. I can't remember what the movie's called, but one of you will recognize it. If you build it, they will come. Field of Dreams. There's a certain romanticism to it. There's a certain passion or longing for a beauty and a great a time of innocence and passion and beauty to the sport, and about people who love the sports. I liked it, even though it's got a strong mystical element. But there are a lot of sport movies that are good. There's one where Denzel Washington is the coach of a football team, a college football team. Anyway, if somebody wanted to make, if for one of these shows, I just had a list of sports movies, I could tell you the ones I really, really enjoyed. But I like sports movies because they are, there's always a hero. All of them follow the same kind of arc. This is why I think The Natural and some of these others are a little different and have a, but the good guys win. Good guys win. Thanks, Jason. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to talk about sports movies. Felapa. What is the country in Europe that is most receptive and more inclined to share and agree with your views, and why? Well, I think the most in Europe would be the UK. I think it's the one that, first of all, has English going for it, has a culture most similar to the United States and most similar to objectivism, if you will, and the ideas of objectivism. I think that next would be countries in Eastern Europe that understand the evils of socialism, but maybe are not religious. So that combination, Georgia comes to mind. Some elements within Poland, Czech Republic, other places where there's a lot of receptivity to Ayn Rand's ideas. But it's rough for me to say. We don't have really good survey data, but clearly the most events, the most interest is in the UK. Have you seen My Mister, Korean series in Netflix? This is truly good value, oriented, theme, plot, characters, fully integrated. I have not. I'll check it out. Thank you. All right, we made $451, so we reached our old goal of $450. So thank you to all the super chatters. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting the show. Thank you for all the people who listened, who all participate in the chat, and who were listening. I hope a lot of you. I hope that those of you who did not listen live, that some of you at least would consider supporting the show on YaronBrookShow.com/support, or on Patreon or Subscribestar. We want to keep the show alive and growing and active, and to do that, we definitely need your support. I didn't talk about recession ? Again. We'll get to that. I don't think that question is going away anytime soon, so there's plenty of opportunity to talk about in the future. So we'll get to that. But for now, it's already 10 o'clock in Spain, so I will bid you good night, and I will, not sure when the next show will be. I'll probably do at least one more show from here, from this office in Madrid. But anyway, I will see you all soon, and have a great night, and have a great rest of your week. Don't forget to like the show before you leave. We should be well over 100 of likes down there. Thanks, everybody.